The sun has passed midday on traditional brand. Don Draper's been drawn and quartered. This notion you can have a mediocre product and instill it with great emotion and just sell a lot of it, that's done. That's over. If you have a truly better product, people will talk about it online and word will get out. So a lot of the capital has been taken out of marketing and is being reinvested in things like supply chain. Can I get you something within 48 hours for free? What do the companies that have added over $100 billion in value in the last decade have in common? They don't advertise. And so the CMOs and marketers, we all love to be nostalgic and say, oh, advertising's coming back, and we give each other awards. Every day, there's less and less oxygen in the room.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Branding is dead. Hey, welcome to Growing a Fruitful Brand, where we discuss how to create and grow a brand that makes the world a better place for you, your customers, and your employees. I'm Ben Lueders, founder and art director of Fruitful Design and Strategy, and this is my business partner and brand strategist, Raj Lulla. And what you just heard was a little clip from Professor Scott Galloway, kind of a marketing, branding expert, and he had some kind of pretty bold, hot takes about the state of advertising and branding. Any initial thoughts there, Raj?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here to break down in what he said. First of all, there's, I would say, a lot of switching between the terms branding, advertising, and marketing. And I would consider those to be three very different disciplines. So,
right. I mean, we easily get them kind of confused because they're somewhat related and there's maybe overlapping elements that people get tripped up on.
Yeah. And so I won't want to break that down, but basically what he said was the era of Don Draper is over.
Right. He's been drawn and quartered.
Yeah. That selling a mediocre product with great emotion just doesn't happen anymore. Can't happen anymore. Right. Especially with social proof of people leaving reviews and all that. And he also said, kind of on the opposite side of that, that if you have a great product, people will talk about it, and he kind of implied for free online, that they'll just tell other people. And I think that that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is this idea of like, is brand dead? What does that even mean to start with? And so I would say, like, let's back all the way up, because we talked about the confusion between the terms advertising, marketing, and branding. Right. We're not an advertising firm, in terms of like, most people aren't buying their pay-per-click ads through us or anything like that. You and I barely touch those things at all. So, so we're not an advertising firm, but let's just talk about advertising. Advertising is you paying money for exposure. So that can be newspaper ads, TV ads, radio ads. It can be ads on podcasts. It can be pay-per-click ads like you have on Google or Facebook or LinkedIn. Yeah. So it's you having some kind of asset, whether that's a message or a photo or a video, and then paying someone else to put it out on their distribution channel. That's advertising. So even him kind of doing a little sleight of hand here to go like, well, these brands, these companies don't invest in branding or advertising. It's like, well, those are different things, just to start with. Right. We're not really going to talk about advertising a ton today. We will kind of address his claims there of whether or not these companies actually advertise. But he's got a fair point that there's less of that going on from these major brands. We'll talk about why in a second. Mm-hmm. Marketing is kind of the in-between between branding and advertising. Marketing is a much broader, category. It can include everything from your website to your ads, to content that you write on your blog, podcast episodes that you're on. It can include in-person, appearances or keynotes at conferences.
Yeah, all your messaging, your visual identity.
Yeah, marketing is getting the word out about your company. That can be paid as an advertising or organic, as they talk about it, with creating content or networking, making appearances. Marketing is a very, very broad category, and we can talk about that a little bit too. And then you have brand. Brand, as we have talked about, is the psychological relationship you build with your customer about who you are, about who your company is. A lot of times we talk about it in terms of it is the promise that you make to your customer. Now, there are some people who would, say that a lot of different things about that definition, but it's a pretty easy one to remember. That I like the other phrase that it's like, brand is what your customer thinks about you before you walk into the room. Now that might be physically walking in the room, or it might be digitally. It might. But if somebody brought up your company in conversation, what would a potential customer think of you? It could be, I've never heard of them. It could be, oh my gosh, they're amazing. It could be, oh my gosh, they suck. But brand is more or less what people think of you, your psychological reputation with people, and those are three obviously very different disciplines. Like marketing includes all of those other activities, blogging, advertising, all those kinds of things. Advertising is pretty narrow because you have to be paying someone for exposure. Branding is the creation of that psychological impression with somebody. One of the other ways I like to hear people talk about that is, Donald Miller, who wrote Building a Story Brand, we're a Story Brand certified agency. He talks about it as that marketing is an exercise in memorization. And so like really good branding is getting people to memorize like your tagline, or getting to memorize.
Just do it.
Getting people to memorize.
I'm loving it.
Yeah. I like the idea of another idea about branding I like is, if you can close your eyes and picture the logo for a company, like if I said Apple right now and you closed your eyes, could you picture the Apple logo? That means they basically have a billboard in your mind. Same with McDonald's, same with Nike. Like if you can close your eyes and picture their logos perfectly, then they have dug their brand into your consciousness. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about like psychological reputation is like you don't have to try even. It's automatic.
Yeah.
Even you might even be unwilling. You might go, I'm trying not to think of the Apple brand right now, and you just thought of the Apple brand. That's how powerful branding is. And it's funny because Scott almost didn't even talk about that. Like he
maybe later in the interview. Yeah,
that's true. We took a 40-second clip out of an hour-long interview or whatever.
But what you were just describing there is why it's like almost impossible to calculate the value of branding sometimes, like especially when you're literally creating something that can live rent free in someone's mind, you have that kind of like staying power, especially some of these bigger brands. It's funny because I was working on a logo yesterday, and one of my kids was next to me, and they were like wanting to know how much you guys charge for a logo and all this stuff, and we were talking about it a little bit. And they were like, "Man, I don't know. I mean, it's just a logo, It's just like it can't be that valuable." And they started talking about exactly this of like how just how powerful that is, how it represents, you to all of your potential audience, your customers, and again, it can just the power to like live rent free. That when you hear that name, it can evoke this image. It's very powerful and valuable.
I really appreciate that you said on our podcast as a branding agency that it's impossible to calculate the value of a brand, because now all of our customers are wondering what the value of
It's another episode.
He definitely was saying it more of the idea that that's actually like a much greater value than most people think. However, I will say that there are ways to calculate it. There are ways for us to there are some companies who should not work with us, who shouldn't make a 5-figure investment on their branding with us, because their return isn't going to be that. Like if they're going to do, under $50,000 or maybe even under $100,000 for the next 10 years, then you're probably better off. I'm thinking like a lawn mowing business or something that's going to do under that amount of money. You're probably better off going and knocking on every door, and it can be called Jimmy's Lawn Service. And the most important thing you're doing for your brand is just getting your name out there and making sure they know your phone number, and then also being around and persistent when, there's kids in my neighborhood. If my grass gets like even an inch too long, they're like, "Hey, mister, do you want us to mow your..."
It's like, scram, get off my lawn. That's what Raj always says.
No, I'm always like, that's when I had kids. But
get out there, son.
But if you don't have the opportunity to make that back, then it's not worth it. Now, on the other side, there's the negative side of a brand value too, where I was thinking about this with movies the other day. Do you ever have a movie that you rather liked the movie, but you can't remember the name of it for whatever reason?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially ones that just have the names are more complicated than they should be.
Like, I'm. This is we didn't rehearse this. So, do you know what the name of the Bob Dylan movie was that just came out?
Give me a second. I know. I guess not.
That right there. That like. I think
the Bob Dylan, if I was telling someone, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that Bob Dylan movie with Chalamet." Or whatever.
Exactly. Like it's crazy to me. The movie's called A Complete Unknown. You don't have to go to Google right now to be like, what was the name of that movie? But
Complete Unknown. It's a complete unknown title.
It's so weird to me that they called it that because I mean, like a Rolling Stone is sitting right there, Blowing in the Wind is sitting right there. Even Bob Dylan is sitting right. It's like there's just so many things they could have called it. It was made by the same director who did Walk the Line, and it's funny because I feel like Walk the Line is so much more of a successful title. It's about Johnny Cash, and it's, I walk the line. It's like you can just hear it when you say it. It's like, oh, it's Johnny Cash.
Well, Complete Unknown is a line from like a Rolling Stone.
I know.
It's there, but it's like it's not the name of the song. It'd be like calling Walk the Line another line from the song Walk the Line.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that does happen is that you can actually have negative value in your brand when it makes it easy to confuse with other companies, with other movies, with other songs, and because it makes you hard to find. And I think right there, it shows some of the ways that we calculate whether or not a brand is successful. What's the return on that brand? Likewise, if I asked you to picture, not you, because you're the wrong person for this, but out there, if I asked you to picture the Logitech logo, could you do it? Could you picture the current?
I was gonna say I can picture the old one and the new one.
Yeah. He's encyclopedic that way. It's not fair. Could you picture the current logo for Microsoft? And like I'm almost certain you could picture one of the older ones, but do you know what the current Microsoft logo is? They just changed the logo for Microsoft Office, and it's possibly a disaster. It's real weird, but there's some of those things that like you maybe even use every day and you couldn't picture the logo for it. And again, branding's not just logo, but or logo is the visual representation of your brand. And there's a lot of these like really big companies that you might actually struggle to picture the current logo for it.
Yeah. Which is interesting too, because you've seen, this is probably another podcast episode, but there's been a resurgence to like the old version of some of these logos. You think of like Burger King, etc.
Yeah, Walmart just kind of pulled back some retro elements of their logo.
Exactly. And so I think that's an interesting thing too, where it's like, man, like it's been how long with the new logo?
Yeah.
And people are still picturing the old logo. It's like maybe maybe there was something there that we missed, in trying to make it more modern or dynamic or whatever we thought we needed to do with the logo at a time. See, it's an interesting thought.
I kind of disagree with that, only because, and maybe just being a couple of years older than you, I remember when those logos felt really dated, like they'd been around for a long time. And, I think of like the old Taco Bell logo with like the yellow and the black and the green and the red.
Yeah.
And especially when they started rolling out the new design of their restaurants, you can tell by the logo that's on the sign how new the store is.
Oh, sure. It's like that with Casey's for me, where it's like I see like the old Casey's one. It's like, I don't know if I want to go in that one.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this one's been updated. Okay, we're safe.
Yep.
Whether it's true or not, I just like it's a psychological thing.
Exactly. And so I think that it's been long enough since we've had the red and yellow Taco Bell logo that if they went back to it now, it'd be like, oh, this is the new freshening of that. But for a while, like there were certain fast food logos that I like. If I see them, I still think like sticky floor, or I think like just kind of grimy because it's like 30 years of grease basically, and so. I don't think that they should have stuck with them. I think that evolution was necessary for us to have nostalgia about that.
Nostalgia. Yeah. And only brands that have been around a long time do you have that. I was just talking with a new client that, you can't, there's something about that brand history, you can't fake it. You can't start a new brand and try to make things, all these throwback elements and like you can't. It has to be, natural. You have to kind of acquire. You have to earn that over time, you know. And so, like, that's kind of a privilege that they have. Some of these older brands to be able to go back to brand elements from a previous time, and now it feeling fresh and feeling on point, and being able to tap into good nostalgia and stuff like that. Where it's like enough time has passed that, like, oh yeah, when I see the old new Pizza Hut logo, I remember like that Pizza Hut birthday I had in 1993 or whatever, and the balloons, and they gave you the shirt, and it's like, it's great, but like you've kind of forgotten how that felt dingy in the late 90s, early 2000s.
It's interesting. I took a brand strategy class with Scott Galloway, and so it's
name drop.
It should have just been. Brands are over, so class is dismissed.
Yeah, he still took your money, I thought.
But no, I think part of what we're talking about here is that, there's a difference between logos and a brand, although the logo is the visual representation of your brand, and marketing and advertising. But he started his class about brand strategy with this question of like, what are the greatest brands? And so he threw it out. There were people from Apple in that class. There were people from other big companies that were a part of that class. And so, of course...
Yeah, can I guess what people said?
Yeah, go ahead.
Apple.
Yep. And
Nike.
Yep. And so it's interesting because to questions like that, or to answers like that, because what's the greatest brand in the world? And Apple and Nike, you'd think, okay, well, Apple's literally the most valuable company in the world.
Yeah, can we go home now?
Yeah. And then he said, try harder. It was like, what are you talking about? How can you have a better brand than Apple? Like, how can you have a better brand than the best company in the world? And so you think, okay, well, maybe he's going for innovative. So maybe it's not like the most valuable company, but like who's actually pushing the envelope? And
is it like Tesla, SpaceX, or like that kind of stuff?
Right. And so there were things that were pushing the envelope, that kind of thing, sure. But he's like, no, think bigger. And somebody on the call says the US dollar.
Was it you, Raj?
No, it wasn't. I wish that I'd come up with an answer that brilliant. And he goes, now we're talking. The US dollar has one of the strongest brands in the entire world. And I love that exercise because it immediately gets you to stop thinking like, oh, we're not just talking about a logo. We're not just talking about...
was he talking about the design of the U.S. dollar?
No.
Should we flash that on the screen? Something about that? Having the pyramid on the back? Or?
Yeah, again, we're talking about the reputation of it. And it's like, when the U.S. dollar became the global currency, that's saying that this green piece of paper is backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, of our army, of our... of our three branches of government, of, the hundreds of millions of people living in the United States. Like, this is good for the exchange of value and goods. This isn't going to be a thing that tomorrow, it's worth 100 pennies today. It's not going to be worth a tenth of a penny tomorrow, because like we're backing this up.
Yeah. Think of how little you think about other like countries' currency.
Yeah.
And how often on the news and other places, you hear people from other places talking about our currency. It's kind of wild. Like, this is why we're so Americentric sometimes.
Yeah, oil is traded in U.S. dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not. It's not from U.S. countries.
Is that really a brand though? Like, is that how unpack that? Like how?
Well, so here's I think a good example. Yeah, I went to India in 2008. It's been far too long since I've been back, but went to India in 2008. I had some. Actually, I'm not sure I brought any Indian money with me. It used to be when we went in the 90s, we had to go to the bank. We had to exchange U.S. dollars for Indian dollars. And you also, depending on like the exchange rate at the time, it's favorable to go like, okay, the rupee's a little low right now. Let's take, $100 and then like you get more rupees for it. But then you would also want to wait when you got back to like when
you feel like a currency trader or something.
Yeah,
like
I mean, yeah.
It's like, it's time to go.
And it could actually cost you money to swap between these currencies depending on the day.
I did this when I went to Mexico once. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I went to India in 2008, I'm like 90% sure I did not swap any cash. But walked into a random shopping mall in India, in a city I'd never been to in India before, and negotiated a price with the shop owner and everything. And then I said, "Do you take US dollars?" He goes, "Oh, sure." Like, it was instant. It wasn't like, let me ask my manager or anything like that. Is, "Oh, sure."
Yeah.
We're talking literally about as far away in the world as you can get from here. Other side of the globe. Like, if you dug a hole the opposite direction, you're pretty close to India. And those people were not only okay with, but were happy to, eager to take U.S. currency.
That is interesting. It reminds me
That's
of,
a heck of a brand.
Yeah, that's a heck of a brand. That reminds me of like the branding of like characters like Mickey Mouse or celebrities like Michael Jordan that like you can go to like indigenous tribes and undiscovered locations and stuff, and they'll recognize Mickey Mouse or whatever because of just like just how recognizable that character is and how widely distributed it is.
Yeah.
I've heard stories of people like being able to recognize, certain, celebrities or certain, things like that. But that is the dollar. Yeah. It's like, they'll find a way to take it, kind of no matter where you go.
Every one of you who likes or subscribes to our podcast makes my kids feel like we're famous. And to be honest, that's all I'm really doing this for. You know that I love Christmas, and so I like anything that's got to do with the brand of Christmas. But we have friends who live in Turkey, and they talk about how Santa Claus is a recognizable figure there. But part of his brand that's been lost in translation, especially in a predominantly Muslim country, is that he's associated with New Year's. And so it's, you'll see Santa, and instead of like Merry Christmas written in cursive next to him, it's Happy New Year. And so you'll have shopping malls decked out like they're for Christmas with Santa even, but they say Happy New Year.
Is this why you still have all your Christmas decor on the outside of your house?
All right, we're throwing shade this morning. It was very cold last week.
It's not that cold this week.
Very cold. The lights are not on. They're just still on the roof.
It's March, Raj. It's March. I just want to say
tomorrow.
it's March.
Not till tomorrow. But Scott said, U.S. dollar really strong. U.S. government obviously very strong. It would be interesting for us to talk about how the brand of the U.S. government is changing right now under this administration.
Oh, sure.
But point is, Scott, the U.S. dollar, U.S. government, those are great brands. And they are impacted by the choices that we make, similar to how if a company, puts out a faulty product, then it affects their brand value. But he said, okay, are there any better? Do you have anything better than the U.S. dollar, the U.S. government? And somebody said, religion, God. And Scott goes, God is the greatest brand in the world.
Oh, and then they had an altar call.
I don't think he meant it quite like you. Because religion is the thing that when people have an experience with it, it often outstrips their expectation of what that experience was going to be. Like, most people don't wake up in the morning and go, I should get a religion today, And so it's not something they were shopping for, not something that they even thought they needed necessarily. When they have an experience with it, and this is true across multiple religions, people will only adopt a religion if it provides them some sense of peace, if it provides them moral direction, that type of stuff, and it improves their life. When they have that experience with that, and don't be offended by my use of this word, but with that product, then what do? They start telling other people about it for free. Sometimes they even put their own money into telling people about it. Think about like if people did that for your company, for your brand. That'd be incredible. If all of you are more than welcome to spend your own money to talk about Fruitful, we're totally okay with it. It's just not a thing that happens, really. Like even as much as I love a wide number of products and services and companies, if anything, I appreciate when they give me money to talk about them. When, when there's referral, things or affiliate links or, kickbacks of some kind. I do tell a lot about people about certain things for free, but I can't think of the last time I spent money to tell somebody about Apple or to tell somebody about Slack or to tell somebody about, name your thing that we enjoy and we use all the time. That it just doesn't happen. Like we're not going to spend our own money to tell other people to give their money to somebody else. But with religion, that's the one thing that they do. So you could argue it's the strongest brand in the world in those terms. And it helps us kind of break out of brand is a logo or brand is advertising. No, brand is this like reputation, this promise that other people memorize, they think about, and are even willing to spread the word about.
Well, I think that's why also, when brands change, there can be, monumental effects, kind of like, as you were mentioning, how with a new presidency and stuff like that, the brand of America changes a little bit when that happens. And that's an interesting thing to kind of observe, that like every kind of administration kind of has its own brand and feel. And you can kind of, think back to what that felt like, the brand of Bill Clinton, the brand of George W. Bush or whatever. And, good and bad. And it's just kind of interesting how that happens, kind of that evolution.
And what's interesting about it is that, regardless of your personal opinion about whether what they're doing is good or bad, what's interesting is that I think everybody agrees to a certain degree that some of this kind of reboot is necessary in this country. I would argue that part of the reason that the Democrats lost was that there was not enough change promised. It was like, look, all of Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon are all going to be monopolies under this next administration. Like if the Democrats win, like nothing's really going to change that much, and so like the brand is going to stay about the same. And with inflation going up and houses being too expensive and all that kind of stuff, people are like, more of the same isn't necessarily that great. A steadiness in that brand, it'd be kind of like, we consistently food poison people, it's like, it's not a great.
Regardless of what you think about the solution, it's just like people, sometimes change is the right brand. Like the brand needs to change regardless of what that is. Like you have to do something.
And
you
so
can't go with the status quo.
In that regard, it makes, what's been going on a smart branding move. But if you don't do it well, then you are messing with some of the strongest brands in the world, which are the U.S. government, the U.S. dollar, and that makes everybody less prosperous and less safe if you do it wrong. So with all that said, okay, getting back to Scott Galloway saying the era of Don Draper is over. You can't sell a mediocre product with great emotion, and companies that have grown by $100 billion don't advertise anymore. First of all, are these things true? And secondly, how do they actually play out for the people who are listening to this podcast? Like, I don't think Tim Cook is listening to this podcast going like, gosh, Raj and Ben, what should I do? It's cool if you are. Hi, Tim. So let's talk about even setting some definitions here. What is a small business? The Small Business Administration classifies a small business anywhere from, obviously $0 up to $40 million in some categories, which is crazy. You can have up to...
We need to have some more small business clients.
Yeah, you can have up to 1,500 employees in some of these categories and still be considered a small business. My small business fits in my house.
Yeah, no kidding.
Definitely a wide range of things here. But I like that it goes up to $40 million. And the reason I like that is because Scott Galloway was talking about companies that have increased their market cap by $100 billion. These companies would have to grow by massive multiples. I'm not even
boggles the imagination.
Yeah, I'm not even going to do the math on camera to tell you how many times that is. But none of these companies, I would even argue none of our clients are going to increase their market cap by $100 billion in the next 10 years, unless they have a play similar to generational giants like Facebook, like Apple, like Netflix, like Google. And again, to be honest, some of those things probably have more to do with the weak antitrust laws in this country than they do with whether or not those were smart branding moves or whether or not those are like great products. It has a lot to do with the fact that you can get away with killing your competition pretty easily at a certain size in this country. So does Scott's advice even have anything for us in that sense of like people who are playing under $100 million? Even if we expanded this to $100 million, which is 1/10 of 1/100th of what he's talking about, and we're just so like such different ball games.
Yeah, these are just different worlds.
Yeah, but even if we expand that anybody $100 million, how should they take Scott's advice here? There are things, I think it's kind of a mixed bag, so the question at the top here is branding dead? So let's talk about the three areas that you talked about. Mediocre product. Do mediocre products work in today's world? I mean, honestly, I will say, in small businesses, they do. Like they maybe don't work great and they maybe don't work forever, but I mean, we had a lawn service company that had a pretty mediocre product, especially for the price, and we still used them for like a year. Like
because they were so cheap,
and they still exist, and they've still got a big warehouse, over on the other side of town. And so like, yeah, I mean, actually mediocre products exist just fine on the small business level. Now I don't recommend it. I don't recommend having a product that is mediocre, but there are tons of mediocre products. I will say, though, in general, the advice of it's much harder to sell a mediocre product than an excellent product is true. So I'll give Scott a true on that one, even though...
Especially in the world of like Amazon reviews and stuff. We think of like, some of the examples you gave of like local lawn service companies is like, well, maybe, it's cheap. It's the best one. They get, it's the best of bad options maybe.
Yeah.
But I do think like, I think about... gosh, if you go on Amazon, it's like you're looking at those stars and those reviews, and things are being populated by those things. And so, and I go through that. Like, I want to read some 1-star reviews. Are these legit? And it'll make me buy off-brand stuff sometimes over on-brand stuff if the reviews are there. And so like there is like, I will say in certain arenas, it makes it like, hey, if you want to break into an industry, make a killer product and maybe the reviews will tell the story, because gone are the days in certain arenas when it's like, you used to be able to just, certain brands could just, sell stuff and people would buy it because it's that brand. That still happens to some degree, but it's got to be really good quality, I think, because the reviews will tell the story.
Yeah, and I think you see something similar with like, let's talk fast food for a second, but you see Runza here in,
getting hungry, Raj.
Yeah, you see Runza here in Omaha, and like the power of the brand of like the big corporate brand, the way that Scott's talking about, has decreased in the sense of like the loyalty to a local brand like Runza that doesn't have the billions of dollars in advertising power that your Taco Bell's or whoever has.
Is Runza regional or is it truly just in Nebraska?
It used to just be in Nebraska. They're a little more regional now, but
okay.
But yeah, I mean, you would probably pick in any area of Omaha, if there's a Runza, Taco Bell, McDonald's, and the lights flickering at the McDonald's and the, Taco Bell, I don't know.
Has the old logo.
Yeah. You're very likely to pick the smaller brand Runza there just because of the affinity for that brand in our state. Kind of similar to the Amazon reviews is what I'm making, is that the smaller brands can exist in today's world because of affinity, because of reviews, because of social proof. But all that to say, an excellent product does outperform typically a mediocre product despite ad spend. It's hard to get a mediocre brand off the ground. So we'll give Scott a true on that. Advertising, he said that your $100 billion companies are not spending money on advertising. First of all, that's patently false. Now,
Yeah, Scott.
I think that the bigger point that he was making is that those companies are not spending the amount on advertising that they would have to in a different era. So, like,
what's the percentage you should be spending on advertising, of your company? Isn't there like a...
Yeah, so the rule of thumb is that you should be spending 10% on marketing.
And they're not.
To be honest, I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to have access to Apple's books, but
yeah.
But
I suspect not.
I would suspect not, especially because, I mean, if you're talking, a $2 trillion company, I don't think that they're spending what is that, $200 billion on marketing.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Year,
it's like, they're definitely spending millions, but like, they're not.
Even if they spent $1 billion on marketing, it's a fraction of the percentage that they
I think that's the
should
point
be.
he's making.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. As opposed to, I'd be curious, what MetLife had to spend to have a blimp with Snoopy flying over every football game for like 50 years. And the commercials and all of that kind of stuff. You do have these larger companies spending a smaller percentage of their revenue on advertising. So that part is true. However, that's not necessarily true for your $40 million brands, for your under $40 million brands, your $1 million brands. These folks are having to spend money on Facebook ads, Google ads, on blogging, on podcasting, on, getting the word out in whatever way. And in fact, Scott himself has called Google and Facebook or Meta attacks on small businesses. He said that basically, like, if you're not doing these things or you don't have some way to grow without these things, then it's just kind of a pay to play thing anymore. That, like, if you want your content to be seen on these platforms, LinkedIn included too, or YouTube included as well, you kind of have to pay to play anymore. You have to have some level of this. So I would call him true on hard to sell a mediocre product. I would say mixed on the advertising thing. Like, advertising is still an important part of small businesses. It's great when you don't have to do it. And I will say that, like, we don't do a lot of traditional advertising. We do almost none. We are a strong referral company. We get a lot of word of mouth business, and we love that. And in that way, we have invested a lot more in the product and the experience than in getting the word out to new people. So we are following Scott's advice in that way. However, we're also not trying to drive foot traffic to a brick and mortar Runza or to Block 16 or a local restaurant or to a local retail shop or whatever. So different businesses definitely should be investing in that local SEO, that local search traffic to drive foot traffic especially.
So for mediocre product, we say that's, partially true. Advertising is mixed. What about brand?
Yeah. So brand, I'm going to give Scott a false on this one, especially in the small business world. Anything under $100 million, anything under $40 million especially. Brand really matters in this range. Like, we talked about your lawn service business. We talked about doctor's offices, those types of things. We were even talking before we recorded. My family got food poisoned by a restaurant chain, one that you know and heard of, and I'm not going to say their name on air.
But it rhymes with no. I'm just kidding.
But we got food poisoned by a restaurant chain and have never gone back there. They went from getting, who knows, they call it $50 a month from us or whatever.
Raj doesn't know, but I've ordered them in right after this episode. No, just kidding.
They went from $50 a month from us to $0 a month from us. And when you're a small business especially, there's only so many of those kinds of customers that you can afford to lose. Like, recurring revenue is the gold standard, right? And this company, through bad practices, lost their reputation with us. We talked, brand is reputation, and they lost that with us because the thing that you want from a restaurant, even more than flavor, even more than quality, is safety. Safety is a non-negotiable And if you violate that brand promise, you're done. And so there's that. Yes, we live in a world of honestly, increasingly mediocre visual brands. Like OpenAI, ChatGPT has even the name ChatGPT, terrible branding across that. But these aren't small businesses. These are businesses that Microsoft is dumping billions into, that investors are dumping billions into. And so they can afford to make all the branding mistakes that they want because they're not playing the same game. They're not trying to get more clients to their therapist office. They're not trying to get more people to do their taxes with them. They're not trying to get more people to drink their coffee. Like that's
a really
massive
good point.
tech companies.
Like as we kind of come towards the end of this episode, I think for application, I think that it's so important to remember that. Like it's so easy for us to compare ourselves to the Amazons of the world. If you're a small business, it's easy to, want to be the Airbnb of this or the Amazon of that or the Apple of this. And it's like, it's helpful to some degree. I think we can learn a lot in those, outsized, big cases, but really we're not playing the same game. And so it's as fun as it is to learn and hear stories and, read the Steve Jobs book or whatever, like, we really are playing different games. There's different rules, there's different things. And so I think if you are a small business, and again, small business can be pretty darn big according to the definition that Raj shared. I think like recognizing that, that we are kind of at a different level is really, I think, a helpful thing to remember.
Yeah, like if branding, marketing is an exercise in memorization, then you can't afford as a small business to be that Bob Dylan movie that nobody can remember the name of. Like
I forgot it again.
a complete unknown. You're fine. And at least that one they're drafting off of the brand of Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah.
They're drafting off the brand of Bob Dylan. And people can go, oh yeah, what was that Bob Dylan movie? You can Google Bob Dylan movie and find a complete unknown in 5 seconds. You can't Google what was that one accounting firm that my friend told me about.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe you can look it up in your email if they emailed about it. Maybe you can look up your text if they texted about it. But like, you know how fast the world moves right now. Like if you're sitting after work and you're going like, gosh, I really hate my, whatever, plumber or like accountant, whatever. We like our accountant, but
I like my plumber. I don't know.
But if you like, I really need a new one. And oh yeah, Raj told me about one today, or my mechanic told me about somebody or whatever. Then you're either gonna have to text that person, go, hey, what was the name of that person again? Or you're gonna have to remember. And so having a great name, having an image that pops to their mind when somebody says their name, or when you think, if imagine the opposite of that scenario. If you go, oh yeah, I need to call that account, and you close your eyes and you think of their logo.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Or if you've got a great, drinkware or a business card or a, or somebody texted you the website and like it's memorable and it's easy and it's, we're working with some great brands right now that I'm just, so excited to be working with, that they have that quality that you go, well, why would I go anywhere else to figure out this thing? So I would argue that brand on this local level, or on this smaller level, even if you're working nationally, is more important than ever. That because in the world of like Amazon, where it's like, yes, you will buy dupes of Lululemon leggings because they've got 5,000 reviews at 5 stars. And probably come from the same factory or were completely ripped off by some out of country company. That's a pretty safe thing to do. That is not safe to do with your taxes. That's not safe to do with your medical care. That's not safe to do. All of these like professional services, especially
with your branding and marketing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, exactly that, right? Like Fiverr's been trying to undercut designers for over a decade now. With like, oh, you can get a logo for $99. We're still here. we still get new calls almost every day for this service because it's not the same. It's not the same service.
People want that, like, a partner, someone who's going to, meet with them, one-on-one and kind of go with them through, the challenges of business and all that.
And even with, Canva and ChatGPT, and you can ask them to make you a logo, but can you ask them to make a logo that will stand out in your market to your particular audience, that is copyrightable or that you can trademark? Can you do all of those things and be confident in it for at least the time being still as a branding agency? Hopefully we're the first ones you think of. Hopefully when you close your mind and think about Fruitful, you see either the cool swoopy logo or you see the orange in your mind, because that's what branding does on a small business level. Is you go, oh, who am I thinking about for branding? I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday who was at Hardy Coffee that we did the branding for originally, and was talking to Autumn over there about starting a small business, and then and they got on topic of branding, and she goes, oh yeah, Fruitful. Like it was instant. Like even our association with other brands that we've done helps communicate the value of our work. And so I'm gonna have to give Scott a complete false on this one, at least on the small business level. So is branding dead for small businesses? Absolutely not.
Nope.
If you want to run a $100 billion business and have a garbage logo like ChatGPT, it's your business. That's totally fine. But for everybody under $100 million, invest in your brand. Create a community around your brand. Create something that's easy to memorize. Create a reputation that is undeniable for the service and the quality you offer, and you're going to do better as a business.
Thanks for joining us today on Growing a Fruitful Brand. If you found today's show helpful, don't forget to subscribe and consider sharing it with someone who might also enjoy it.
If you'd like to work with Fruitful on a branding, website, or messaging project of your own, you can always reach out on our website, fruitful.design.
But until next time, don't forget to grow something good.